tombs reveal about death and burial in this period? Now, to answer this question, keeping in mind this was not actually source K in the HSC. I don't know what source K was because I couldn't access it from the Board of Studies because they haven't released a copyright for it yet.
That's why I was confused.
Okay. Oh, just because of that one thing?
Yeah, because that's not the correct source. I'm
oh, yeah. Alright, cool, great. Alright, now, keeping in mind this source, a couple of things that you have to know about this source is, for example, did you sign in? Just sit down, I'll sign in. That's okay. Thinking about what we need to know to interpret this source. Okay, and also thinking that our entire answer does not need to be around this source, but it needs to make reference to this source at least once. Okay, so who can tell me something about the design of this tomb? Yep.
It has off-cut chambers and a domed roof.
Okay, so those off-cut chambers and a domed roof. Okay, now these are two very distinctive things. For example, the domed roof tends to be what is the great signifier for it being a Tholos tomb. Okay? Now, Tholos tombs, in what period of Minoan Crete do they appear? Late Minoan. Okay? They are certainly not pre-palatial and they're not early palace period either. Okay? When we're just thinking about it in terms of time alone, okay, what does that tell us? Funerary customs have changed over time, haven't they? Okay, they have moved away from these house and rectangular tombs, and also the, I want to say the abyss tombs, but that's not right. Cis tombs, thank you, and the cis tombs, and moved towards these Tholos tombs. Okay. So funerary customs are changing over the period, and we are left with a late Minoan one where it's quite sophisticated. Okay, what else do tombs reveal about this period, about burial in this period, with reference to the source?
The Tholos tombs had ossuaries where a lot of bones would have been collected, where the bodies would have been stored, and then once they decomposed, the bones would have been swept aside and all the skulls would be collected. Okay, so we know that Tholos tombs definitely had ossuaries. Okay, we can see that, come in, we can see that from the massive amount of bones that have been collected in these tombs. Okay, now because there's so many bones in those tombs, these tombs, what does that suggest about Minoan burial and religion?
Ancestral burial was very, very common.
Yes, ancestral burial is very, very common, but that's not the word we're looking for here.
They reused the tombs.
Excellent. Okay. They reused the tombs, so they were recycling the dead people's places, basically. But there's a very special word that we're missing, starts with a C. Communal. Very well done, Chelsea. Okay. It's communal burial. Okay. Thinking about what our historian said, how many families might you find in these tombs? If you go back to, I believe it's Brannigan, each tomb would usually consist of 2 nuclear families, okay? Possibly in this clan-based system, as you were saying, but they are communal buried in the fact that they are burying on top of each other, massive amounts of bones, and then they are sweeping out the bones once they're fully decomposed. What parts do they keep after the bones of the skull? Okay? So with this one thing, we are actually seeing quite a lot about Minoan burial just from this source alone. Okay? We know that it's communal, we know that they keep the bones and ossuaries, we know that it's probably based around a family system, we know that they, example, respect the dead, and you can also say that they build on these Tholos tombs as well, because what are these small chambers used for?
Storage.
The storage of the bones. Okay, you've got the main bodies here, but once the flesh is gone from those bodies, the bones are going there. Now, all these rooms here, are they all certainly have been built at the same time this was?
They would have been added once the main chamber would have been too full.
Exactly right, okay? So you would have had additions onto this tomb, okay? You wouldn't have just had this tomb and then everything else was built of it during the same period. It would have been added on, okay? So we have quite a lot of things going on with just a picture telling us about what burial is happening in this period, okay? What might be something that we can bring in from our own knowledge regarding burial in this period that might not just be found in this source? Yes?
They might have had altars outside the main tomb for family members or anyone else to pay their respects to the dead.
Very good, okay? So we've seen from other tombs that there might be altars outside of those tombs where family can pay respect to the dead and things like that. What might that be evidence for us to see of? Funerary cults, very good. Okay. What else can we see that's not just present in this picture? How has the burial process or the idea of burial changed over this time? It's become something more, starting with an I.
Individual.
Very good. Individualistic. Okay? People's bodies are starting to be treated more and more as individuals, rather than just everyone being dumped in a hole like in the early Minoan period. Because what were they buried without in the early Minoan period? Coffins. Exactly right. Now, when you were buried, what's a Minoan word for the coffin? Larnax. Okay. When you're buried in a larnax, are you actually buried underground?
No, you're above the ground in the box.
Exactly right. What's your body exposed to?
The air.
The air, and it will decompose naturally via the air. Okay. It makes for a very, very smelly tomb, but you are decomposing, and then once they find all your flesh is gone, they're going to tip the bucket out, you're going into the storage room, and they're putting another body in. Okay? Thinking about coffins, okay, either the larnax or the pithoi coffin, what else do they reveal about Minoan burial? Maybe perhaps in the way that the body is placed or something that happens with the body?
They make burial reminiscent of the cycle of life back when people in fetal position.
Exactly right. When a body is thrown into the coffin, keeping in mind Minoan coffins are not made in the way that ours are, where you lie fully out, you are put into that fetal position, okay? Meaning it could be reminiscent of what it's like in the womb, and they're trying to get that little connection back to it. And also that what happens if you don't move a body shortly after death?
The muscles tighten up and can't move it.
Do you remember what that's called? Rigor mortis. Okay? Literally stiff death. Okay, if you translate it literally. If you try to move a body in rigor mortis, you have to actually break bones to get it in. Okay? Snap, crackle, and pop. Okay? So you can see, just at this source, the source gives us a lot, but there's plenty of stuff that we also know around this as well. Okay? Our other question is, what do rituals reveal about Minoan religion in this period? Did anyone choose to answer this one? Yeah?
I barely answered it. The source provided a vast term causes evidence of the funerary cult and familial or communal burial. The follow more hold signs of problems in families. The lost tombs are built into hillsides within the group, which shows their important architecture of the ritual, depicting social stratification. Follow also hold altars for libation and voting tribute to those past or funerary gods.
Good. Okay. Now the only thing I would give in criticism for that is if you get a 6-mark question like that, you've seen rituals and you've immediately gone, it must be about dead people, okay? Which is a fair enough conclusion because you probably saw the other question and you went, oh, it's a funeral theme, okay? But there would be other things to answer outside of that, okay? For example, when we were doing peak sanctuaries, not yesterday, but the day before, okay? what rituals may have taken place on peak sanctuaries? Sacrifice and votive offerings. Okay? So we have bones of animals, but we also have...
The figurines in the fire pit.
Yes, and what's left of the figurines? Starts with A, three-letter word.
Oh,
Ash. Okay? So we have all this ash left of the figurines. We have all this ash basically saying there was probably a really big fire pit on top of this mountain. Okay? And we have this ritual of burning. Okay? So we can say that votive offerings and sacrifices are important parts of Minoan ritual and therefore religion. Okay? Don't fall into the trap of just going to funeral, because there's plenty of other stuff to talk about besides those. Okay? Now, who has actually looked at a past paper for HSC? So this is something that we really need to get on to. So what I will actually do, Possums, is I will show you what it's like, just because this is absolutely essential knowledge. Okay, so let's quickly just go back. So, as you know, girls, this is the NASA website. Okay, literally go into Google and type NASA past papers. Literally that simple. Okay. Now, when you type that, you click on the first link, and you'll be brought here, HSC examination papers. Okay. Obviously, you find the subject that you want to know. For us, it's ancient history. Okay. You go down to it, it will open up into almost every single year that there's ever been an ancient history examination. Now you will find that the newest one, like 2020, does not have all the resources on it yet, because either they haven't uploaded the marking criteria yet, because it's only just happened, okay, or they haven't gotten copyright for all the sources yet, which is where it's really, really annoying in both English and history, because you have to wait a couple of months or a couple of years for that. Okay? Now, for the sake of this, we're not going to go to 2020 because it doesn't have everything we need yet. We'll have a look at 2019. Now, you'll see here that you open up what's called an exam pack, and you get two different download papers here. You get the exam paper, and you get the marking guidelines. Now, both of them are super important. Okay? The top one is what you'd actually get in the examination if you were sitting it. The bottom one is what the markers will use to allocate you marks. Okay, the marking criteria, the rubric. Okay? So let's open both here, because both of them are useful to us. Okay, so we've got our past paper here. Okay, now it's really useful looking at past papers, especially the past 2 years, because sadly we've changed now in ancient history for the whole syllabus. So 2020 and 2019 are the only years that are relevant towards us. Okay, maybe 2018 as well. But we don't have the option like a lot of the other subjects where we can just go back for 10 years and look at all the questions. Okay? So we are looking for the Minoan section. So I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to do fine, Minoan. Okay? And we can see here, question 9, option F, Bronze Age, Minoan Crete. Okay? We have our 3 different questions for this section. All of them must be answered. Okay? It's not like other sections where you might have only 2 questions and it has an or in between it, and you have to choose which one you're going to answer. In this section, you have to do all 3 because they equal up together 25 marks. Okay? Now, we stole this one for our do now. What do rituals reveal about Minoan religion in this period? So what we can do is we can go over to our marking guidelines, and you'll see here that they go through every question. Okay? If you wanted 5 marks for the first question, these are all the things that you would have had to have done. Okay? If you didn't do those, your marks drop, boom, boom, boom. Just like any other assessment with your criteria and rubric. Okay? The really handy thing about these marking guidelines is they give you this underneath. Answers could include. Okay? Basically going over, hey, if you're answering this question, here's the things that you could have possibly included, and you can write your answer from those. It's worth going over these past papers, trying to do them yourself, and trying to actually mark yourself as well, doing a bit of self-evaluation. Okay? Because there's nothing better than self-evaluation. If you can tell yourself where you have actually gone wrong, you're far more likely to actually remember that for the HSC, rather than me just pointing at everything and going wrong, wrong, right, right. Okay? So we are looking for question F, Bronze Age Minoan Crete. And you'll see here, because it's a section 2, even though we might be doing Persia, or you might be doing Minoan Crete, or you might be doing Sparta, they all have the same marking criteria for these questions. So which question are we doing? We are doing B, so we have to go to part B, of course, makes sense. And here we can see what we would have had to have done to achieve 6 marks in total. So our question was, what do rituals reveal about Minoan religion in this period? To get 6, we would have had to demonstrate thorough knowledge and understanding of historical features relevant to the question. Basically, you have to show the marker what you know, and you have to show them that you know it in depth. But you also have to show that you can interact with the question, not just verbally and diarrhea all the knowledge that you know onto the paper and hope that it sticks. Okay? Communicates ideas and information logically, meaning it has to make sense and has to have an order. Using appropriate historical terms and concepts. Use your history words, basically. Okay, the words that we learn in class, we have to engage with the terminology. So we can actually see here that they have actually given us a sample answer to this, so question 9b. Let's read through what their one was. Rituals demonstrate Minoan preoccupation with nature and fertility, as well as the importance of religion in Minoan society. Evidence which can be used to elaborate on these general observations, for example, observations include, for example, evidence for animal sacrifice, such as the Aegaea Triada sarcophagus, and the possibility of human sacrifice. And okay, that word. Okay? Notice what they've done in the very first sentence. They've told us, okay, so we're looking at ritual and it's deal with the Minoans' religion. Well, it's all about nature and fertility. Okay? That's what this whole ritual thing's been about. Okay? Well, how do I know it's all about nature and fertility? Well, we can elaborate that with these 2 sources here. Okay? We know about libations in the throne room, processions and dance raised by the walkways, shown on the harvester bars, and scenes of dancing shown on seals, cups, and bowls. Additionally, we know about bull leaping, shown on frescoes, and votive offerings, material remained in caves. Okay? You can see that they have not just settled with 1 or 2, they have tried to give the marker a whole bunch of things, demonstrating that they don't just know about funeral, or they don't just know about animal sacrifice, they know about this entire thing. And they are giving the marker a whole list of stuff that they know, thorough knowledge, as well as evidence to back up what that thorough knowledge is. Okay? Before we go on, does anyone have any questions about that? Yes?
So So, you know how the old syllabus had Minoan on it?
Yes.
Does that mean we could do the...
So the old syllabus did have Minoans on it, okay? There has been a couple of dot points that have been updated. Now, your question, I believe, would be, can we use past papers in regards to Minoans? Yes and no. There will be some dot points that are still relevant for, and yes, you can use those questions. But there will also be some that are just no longer existing in the current syllabus and are pointless for you to do, they waste your time.
Okay.
Okay?
In the sample, they only mentioned the sources in like brackets. Can we do that? Do we need to talk more about in detail?
I'll be honest, it's one of the first times that I've seen that happen. If they are providing it in the evidence marking guidelines, I would say yes. Okay? Would I recommend it? I don't think it's too logical and cohesive, but I'm not the marker here. If the NESA is saying yes, then yes.
Yeah. Cool. Makes
Okay.
it easier. We don't have to elaborate.
Yes, possible.
Are the questions just taken directly from the syllabus?
Yes. Okay, so questions are always taken directly from the syllabus. The markers in NESA are not allowed to ask you questions outside of what the syllabus teaches. Okay? That syllabus is your legal guiding frame. If they happen to ask you anything outside of that legal frame, you would basically see every ancient history teacher in the state pull their hairs out and go burn NESA down.
Yeah.
Okay? Which did almost happen in 2018 because they changed the wording in some of the questions that was not actually in the syllabus. And the ancient history teachers went absolutely ape crap. Okay? So that syllabus is your guiding document. Always follow. Okay? And think about the verbs that it asks in the syllabus. How it's basically directing you to ask and answer these questions. Okay? Any other questions? Fabulous. Alright. So, seeing as we've just done that, that is your title for today, lovelies. So we are quickly going to blow through this one, okay? And it's myths and legends relating to the Minoans. Was there anyone else besides Shane that just came in later? No? I better mark as good as the key.
Oh, thank you. I'm always good. I'm always late. I'm just going to grab some paper.
No worries, miss. Okay.
Usually want I'll take down some notes.
Yeah, I'm
Always something to do.
Yeah.
But I apologise for being late.
No, not at all. Alright, so, myths and legends relating to the Minoans. Now, here's going to be a throwback to year 8 and 9. Who can tell me what the difference between a myth and a legend is?
Myth, religious story, legend, not so religious story. Legend of Excalibur and the Stone, myth of...
Close, but no cigar. Okay. Has anyone got a more detailed answer?
Do myths include like mythical creatures and gods and stuff, but legends are just stories that have kind of been told through generations?
Yes. Okay, that would probably be a more accurate representation of it. Okay. A myth is, like you were saying, Flynn, normally a religious story. Okay. Usually with allegorical meanings, meaning it has a moral purpose to tell something, but it has very otherworldly or outlandish creatures and things like that. Okay? It would also be something that historians would not place much faith in. Okay? They're looking at it going, no. Okay, yes.
Then why is there faith placed in the Odyssey where they mention Zeus?
So, the Odyssey is a very conjectured document, as we know. Okay? And there's always people trying to break it down. Now, there are elements and kernels of truth in the Odyssey. which makes us think that it's something like a legend, which is what I'll explain now, where a legend is a story that usually is following someone that has existed, but has been built up to an insane degree. Okay? So think about the Odyssey in of itself. The Odyssey is obviously following the Greek hero Odysseus as he tries to travel back home from the Trojan War, and it takes him 20 years to get back home. Okay? Now, in and of itself, the story is not believable. Man is trying to get home, he fought in Trojan War, he's trying to get back to his island of Ithaca.
Athene showed up to Tarmac and said, hey, get those men out of your house.
Yeah. What does become unbelievable is the events along the way, which we think might have been built up. Yes?
For the Odyssey, wouldn't they take actual archaeological evidence and try to relate it to the stories?
Absolutely they would. And that's why we're saying we do have evidence that's sort of linking this story of the Odyssey to real life things, which might consider it to be a legend rather than a myth. Okay? Now, the Greek gods fighting the Titans at the beginning of time, that's a myth. Okay? But Odysseus, it's likely that it could have happened. Okay? Just didn't involve maybe cyclopses and things like that. Okay? Or a cyclops to our understanding. Okay, so what are our main myths and legends related to the Minoans? Well, we have three that we've discussed so far. Okay. First of all that we have is Theseus and the Minotaur. We have Icarus and Daedalus. And of course we have Atlantis. Okay, yes.
So what's like Caius Daedalus again?
We're going to go through it.
Oh, okay. Because
That is the one that flew too close to the sun, yes.
Daedalus won the build the Minotaur's weapon.
Yes. Same person. Okay? So these are the big three stories, or the big three myths and legends that we relate to the Minoans when we talk about them. Okay? And each one of these stories has potential meaning behind it, where they're trying to give off an expression or a meaning of the story, and bits and pieces of kernels of truth. For example, we know that Arthur Evans is absolutely infatuated with Theseus and the Minotaur story, not because he particularly believes that there was a Minotaur, but because he believes that King Minos involved in it was an actual significant figure. Okay? So, let's have a look at trying to summarise these stories. Okay? We've done the Minotaur before, we've done it quite a number of times. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through this and summarise. Okay? Shanna, can you see the first box from here in the top left?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of-ish. I'll try and make that bigger just for everyone else. Better? Okay, can you read the first box, please?
A perfect white bull, a gift from Zeus, appears in a royal creeping herd of cattle. King Minos has to sacrifice the bull to Zeus, but he chooses an inferior one. In revenge, Zeus makes his queen passive a ball of mud with the bull. There are natural reunion, assisted by an invention of. Sorry.
That's right. Some parts are hard to read because the letters are being cut off.
Minos' engineer produces a Minotaur, half man, half bull. The Minotaur is imprisoned in a labyrinth, so Minos can hide him from view and imprison him.
Very good. Now, it's saying that Evans. It's saying that King Minos got a gift from Zeus. Okay? What historian's view is that supporting and what theory?
It's kingship.
Evans' kingship, but specifically.
King Minos was like the ruler.
But let's go a bit deeper. Sorry.
That was
Yes, thalassocracy, but there's one in particular from Evans. What type of king? Priest king. Because remembering that Evans was on this idea that King Minos was able to commune, to talk with Zeus. And we have this idea of theocracy. Well, the start of this story really supports that. We have this idea of King Minos being able to talk to Zeus. Zeus blesses his kingship by giving him the pure white bull. But basically, King Minos does him the dirty and doesn't actually sacrifice the bull like he's meant to. He chooses to sacrifice an inferior one. So Zeus curses Queen Pasiphae to fall madly in love with the bull, thus making the Minotaur. Okay? Montage, can you read the one on the top right, please?
The player's a bit interesting.
Androgeus.
Androgeus, son of Minos and Pasiphae, is murdered by agents of Aegeus, king of Athens, while he's visiting Athens. Minos demands compensation from Aegeus. Every 8 years, 7 youths and 7 girls must be sent as tributes to be fed to the Minotaur.
Very good. Okay, so we have the whole Minotaur story beginning and the sacrifice coming from it. Ready?
This relates to Minos, but since this story came after the Mycenaeans, it's possible that Minos was a Mycenaean king, but not a Minoan king.
Absolutely. Okay, and this is the problem with dealing with these ancient stories. There's so much possibility about what it actually might represent. With that, Ring, can I get you to read the bottom right one?
Theseus, Aegeus' only son, volunteers to go to Crete as a tribute, so that he can kill the Minotaur and save the other tributes. He agrees to sail home under a white sail if he is successful.
Very good. So, on his arrival, Ariadne, Minos' daughter, falls in love with Theseus and gives him a ball and string and a dagger to enable him to get through the labyrinth, kill the Minotaur and return safely. He agrees to take her and her sister Phaedra to Athens with him. Vivian, you want to read the last one?
Theseus successfully navigates the labyrinth, kills the Minotaur and escapes with the girls after sabotaging the Minoan fleet to prevent pursuit. His failure to change his ship's black sail to white results in Aegeus' suicide. He throws himself from a headland into the sea, which is now called the Aegean after him.
Good. That last part of the story, what major Minoan idea is that supporting? There's like a couple of key words that offer a really big insight into one of the big ideas of Minoan. Yes?
Minoan fleet.
Yes. What does it support?
Thalassocracy.
This idea of thalassocracy. He's saying that there is a Minoan fleet, that it's dangerous, that it controls the waves. He sabotages it and therefore hinders or hurts the Minoan thalassocracy. Okay? So it worked. So we are familiar with the Minotaur story. This is probably the third time that we've gone through it. Okay? The one that we are not familiar with is the story of Icarus and Daedalus. Okay? So we've got a short video to watch with this one. Okay? What I want you to think about in this regard is, what's the meaning of the story of Icarus and Daedalus? Okay? Because these stories always have meanings. Okay? A lot of stories that we tell is sort of like, don't steal, or eventually something of yours will be stolen and you can't complain. Okay?
Is the moral of Icarus just don't get up yourself?
Yes and no. It has a deeper moral than that. Okay?
Redo. Oh, did it.
Now I get to fight the speaker all over again.
Yay!
Yay! I hate this bloody speaker.
Your laptop will be on mute.
It's fake news. I think it's the best.
No! Double bad impressions.
Terrible.
That's a mouse. I don't think I want to plug the mouse in.
So we know you can do a Trump accent, but can you do an Obama accent?
Oh, well.
No.
What you gotta understand is,
You got
Obama has quite had a drawn out accent.
And then you just be called racist for that one.
Look, if I was going to get called racist, it's for something else.
Yeah.
It's good as some laughed a bit too hard on that one.
I know.
Alright.
Dreadful.
Yeah.
Oh, Flynn, you're on.
Sad.
Sad.
Sad. Very sad.
Sad.
It's alright, I'll cover the camera.
Computers are stupid.
Yeah, computers are stupid, but that's okay. I should have enough speaker on the laptop, and also we have subtitles that are actually relatively good. So let's go from there.
Okay. It's Tenet, the subtitles are awesome.
Love the live.
Yes, please, miss. Can we all hear?
Yeah.
Fabulous.
In mythological ancient Greece, soaring above Crete on wings made from wax and feathers, Icarus, the son of Daedalus, defied the laws of both man and nature. Ignoring the warnings of his father, he rose higher and higher. To witnesses on the ground, he looked like a god, and as he peered down from above, he felt like one too. But in mythological ancient Greece, the line that separated God from man was absolute, and the punishment for mortals who attempted to cross it was severe. Such was the case for Icarus and Daedalus. Years before Icarus was born, his father Daedalus was highly regarded as a genius inventor, craftsman, and sculptor in his homeland of Athens. He invented carpentry and all the tools used for it. He designed the first bathhouse and the first dance floor. He made sculptures so lifelike that Hercules mistook them for actual men. Though skilled and celebrated, Daedalus was egotistical and jealous. Worried that his nephew was a more skillful craftsman, Daedalus murdered him. As punishment, Daedalus was banished from Athens and made his way to Crete. Preceded by his storied reputation, Daedalus was welcomed with open arms by Crete's king Minos. There, acting as the palace technical advisor, Daedalus continued to push the boundaries. For the king's children, he made mechanically animated toys that seemed alive. He invented the ship's sail and mast, which gave humans control over the wind. With every creation, Daedalus challenged human limitations that had so far kept mortals separate from gods.
Thinking about Daedalus, and thinking about the Minoan theories and what we know about them, what might Daedalus be responsible for in regards to our perception of Minoan civilization? Their architecture and technology. Okay, because remember, one of the things that we're looking at in Theora was, their technology and architecture is so far ahead of everyone else that we think they might have been Atlantis. Okay, this mythical idea of this super state that's technologically advanced. Well, Daedalus has moved over to Minoan Crete, and this story is basically saying he gave a lot of technology to Minoan Crete. Okay, yes?
But again, like, it's Mycenaean, and that also kind of is, like, it kind of takes away the achievements of the actual Minoans.
I would say this would be a Greek one, not a Mycenaean one. So this
like,
would, yeah.
After that.
Yes, so it would be after. The original orientation of this story seems to be very firm that it's not Mycenaean. It's definitely this sort of pre-Mycenaean power of the Minoans.
Finally, he broke right through. King Minos' wife, Pasiphae, had been cursed by the god Poseidon to fall in love with the king's prized bull. Under this spell, she asked Daedalus to help her seduce it. With characteristic audacity, he agreed. Daedalus constructed a hollow wooden cow, so realistic that it fooled the bull. With Pasiphae hiding inside Daedalus' creation, she conceived and gave birth to the half-human, half-bull Minotaur. This, of course, enraged the king, who blamed Daedalus for enabling such a horrible perversion of natural law. As punishment, Daedalus was forced to construct an inescapable labyrinth beneath the palace for the Minotaur.
Now, there's a really important thing about what you're seeing there, the labyrinth, okay? and some of our readings have already gone through it. What did they think the labyrinth might have actually been? A couple of historians have suggested this. Do you remember looking at the palace layout for Knossos? How we looked at the map of what the palace looked like and how it's got the rooms going everywhere in the courtyard? Some historians have actually suggested that this palace layout is actually the maze. So if we look at Knossos palace layout, some people have suggested, hey, look at the palace layout. If you are unfamiliar with how to get around that palace, that would be like a maze or a labyrinth. Okay? So they are basically saying, maybe there's some truth in this. Maybe this big labyrinth that they're suggesting was underneath the palace was actually the palace itself, and it was a maze if you didn't know how to get out of there. Okay? Was there a really, really big bull half-man in there?
No.
Maybe not. Okay?
Seeing as they mentioned the union of Pasiphae and the bull broke natural law, could that just be reference or metaphor to human sacrifice and interracial marriage?
I mean, there's so many things that it could actually reference. So it could be an unnatural marriage in what they consider, and they basically put that story on there. I think my favourite theory, and I've told you this one before, is that King Minos has had a son with mental or physical disabilities, and he's gone and blamed the wife, saying she's had an affair with a bull or someone else. Meanwhile, he's had to keep the son alive, and they've built this story around this child with disabilities. Okay? This is a strong possibility, because we know that the ancient world does not deal with mental and physical disabilities like we do.
Wouldn't it be easier for him to actually kill them? Because like they don't actually care about like people with disabilities.
Look, I think you can't just say that about the ancient people. Like if we're talking Sparta, I'd go, yeah, they just leave on a mountain if they didn't look right. But even in the ancient world, fathers still love their sons.
I was going to literally say just Sparta the child.
Yeah.
The jackals.
Yeah.
Sparta was something else.
It wouldn't be the first time in history, in particularly ancient wise, where a father has chosen to seclude a son with disabilities rather than acknowledging the fact, things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't say just leave them to die. We have this really poor view of ancient people, but remembering it, at heart and soul of things, they are still human. They would have general concern about their children. Okay, just maybe not the way that we would express it nowadays. Okay? Alright, so.
When it was finished, Minos then imprisoned Daedalus and his only son Icarus within the top of the tallest tower on the island, where they were to remain for the rest of their lives. But Daedalus was still a genius inventor. While observing the birds that circled his prison, the means for escape became clear. He and Icarus would fly away from their prison as only birds or gods could do. Using feathers from the flocks that perched on the tower and the wax from candles, Daedalus constructed 2 pairs of giant wings. As he strapped the wings to his son Icarus, he gave a warning. Flying too near the ocean would dampen the wings and make them too heavy to use. Flying too near the sun, the heat would melt the wax and the wings would disintegrate. In either case, they surely would die. Therefore, the key to their escape would be in keeping to the middle. With the instructions clear, both men leapt from the tower. They were the first mortals ever to fly. While Daedalus stayed carefully to the midway course, Icarus was overwhelmed with the ecstasy of flight and overcome with the feeling of divine power that came with it. Daedalus could only watch in horror as Icarus ascended higher and higher, powerless to change his son's dire fate. When the heat the sun melted the wax on his wings, Icarus fell from the sky. Just as Daedalus had many times ignored the consequences of defying the natural laws of mortal men in the service of his ego, Icarus was also carried away by his own hubris. In the end, both men paid for their departure from the path of moderation dearly. Icarus with his life, and Daedalus with his regret.
Okay. So at the start of this, I told you, think about what the moral of each of these stories are. Thank you, miss. Okay. A key element of Greek stories in particular is this idea of hubris. Okay? Doing something wrong and getting your comeuppance for it. Okay? So what was the hubris in the story of Icarus and Daedalus? Okay, so ego and curiosity will kill you. We literally have a saying for...
Curiosity killed the cat.
Exactly right. We have a saying for this in English, curiosity killed the cat. Okay? What else might be the element of hubris here that they're really trying to emphasise? Defying natural law. Or more specifically, trying to go into the realm of the gods. Okay? You do not get to go into the realm of the gods. The gods have clear boundaries for what humans can do, and any attempt to go into those boundaries will result in your death. Okay? So it's that idea of natural law and not stepping into the gods' territory. Okay? Now, what's the motto and myths and legends related to the Minoans? The stories are often what we call allegorical in nature, meaning they have a meaning behind it. Okay? It's mainly always obey or respect the gods, or they will annihilate you and your society.
Fair enough.
Which makes sense because a lot of these stories have the Minoans not respecting the gods, not respecting the natural way of things. Well, how did the Greeks think the Minoans were annihilated?
Poseidon got angry and said splish splash.
Poseidon got angry, said splish splash, and destroyed a possible Atlantis society because they weren't following the gods' orders. Okay? Now we look at that now and go, okay, we probably think that the volcano at Theros Lantarini blew up and it eventually caused an ash storm which annihilated Minoan crops. But to the ancient world, annoying the gods and getting killed for it would have made perfect sense.
I mean, that kind of thinking is still used today, just on a more atheistic level.
Oh yeah, look, that sort of thinking, I remember about 2014, there was massive floods in England, and I remember one of the bishops coming out going, God has sent these floods down upon us for homosexual marriage or something like that. And that happens every part of the world and every religion.
That happened for the floods earlier this year.
Yeah, so there's still very much that sort of thinking in society, but I wouldn't say it's nearly as common as it was in the ancient
It's
world.
less prominent, but it's still there. Like,
Yeah.
was it like, I think it's like Israel Flower or something said earlier this year, Australia's on fire because they legalized gay marriage.
Yeah, well,
It's like, okay, darling.
he's a rather interesting person.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say while being filmed. Alright, so what I want you to do, Sunshines, we have 10 minutes left and we have a whole bunch of sources and evidence. Okay? Now, these sources relate to the stories that you've just heard. What I want you to think about is how do these sources prove what is happening in the stories, or at the very least relate to them.
Okay.
Okay? But this is your homework. If you don't finish it, get the readings done. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Would you like to support this?
So can I wrap up the recording?